This is a true say, a good morning. That's very, very early. We are most grateful for you to join us, even if it's such an early moment of a very long day ahead of us. And after extremely mobilizing inauguration moment yesterday, I thought a sentence from the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, very much encompasses some of the feelings were shared amongst all of us yesterday. Amina Mohammed said, "Men go to war and they look to win it. Women look for peace because we know the burden of that." So that's a very, very powerful statement that really encompasses the reality of the current multilateral situation, the reality of the men's power, the manosphere dominating the international system, and our attitude, the attitude of women in these extremely complicated situations. We know what we get is not acceptable, and we need to mobilize. At the end of the session, the CEO of Women Together just said, we are not here bringing all these women together for nothing. This is exactly what we want to get to work after. So in 3 years, we have lots of things done. Well, GWL, the organization that is calling this gathering, is formed by 80 women that all, I'm one of them, have served the United Nations in very senior positions. And it was created after a failure, a collective failure of 7 women that tried 10 years ago to become one of them Secretary General of the United Nations. And the 3 failed together with other 4 women that also tried. And out of this failure, they got the energy to gather together, create GWL, Global Women Leaders Voices, and to ensure that in the next time, that is now, 10 years after, we do not encounter the same difficulties. So the main purposes of Susana Malcorra, GWL President, Irina Bokova, GWL Vice President and Co-founder, and Helen Clark, GWL Vice President and Co-founder, was to work for multilateralism and for equality. And what is equal in the current international system is that a woman, after 80 years, does become the Secretary General of the United Nations. In this context, we have been working on many fronts, in particularly gathering evidence of what has been happening in the multilateral system for so many years, the last years, since we were founded in 2019, but also not only looking for figures about women's representation, but looking for ideas, looking to influence the international system to change the course, to change the multilateralist course, and to change women's representation. And today, we will have the occasion to discuss about power, about representation, about the future of the UN with women. One of us is a member, Kate. Welcome, Kate Gilmore. Kate was Assistant Secretary General for the United Nations, and she was the Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights with a long background, history, experience in human rights. And something very interesting, Kate is from Melbourne. So welcome to your hometown. Yes, isn't it fantastic that we gather in your hometown after having worked together in Geneva and in New York. Next to Kate, we have the Spanish ambassador to Canberra. She didn't come all the way from Madrid, but all the way from Canberra. But she is a very distinguished ambassador, very distinguished diplomat of the Spanish Foreign Service, with experience as ambassador in Vienna, representing Spain to the international organizations based in Vienna, but many other positions. Esther Monterrubio. Esther, thank you very much. We are in your territory somehow. And with us we have as well Maria Noel Leoni. Maria is an outstanding, experienced lawyer on how to bring about a more equal judiciary system. She is here representing GWL. GWL, she's the GWL is the global campaign for equality in the judiciary system, based in Washington, but influencing the systems across the world, national and international. And she's Uruguayan by nationality. So you also came from very far away, in particular Washington. Thank you very much. And last but not least, we are delighted to have with us Jodka Samuel from Mozambique. Mozambique, several years ago, was created an organization, Girl Move Academy, which was distinguished by UNESCO for the impact in education for young women. And we are delighted that she made all the way from Maputo, and definitely with a perspective that will inspire all of us. So, this is the group. We want to share first ideas from our panelists, and then hear from your ideas, opinions about how do we influence power, how do we move representation for women, and how do we shape a future for the United Nations in a year that is critical. We started just last week with a debate amongst 4 persons, 2 women and 2 men, that want to become Secretary General of the UN. Probably more will come to this race, but we are very interested that this race ends up with the strongest person leading the United Nations, and we have no doubt that the strongest will be a woman. So, I'm going to give the floor first to Kate, because GWL, Global Women Leaders Voices, do regularly surveys, more than surveys, analysis of the current situation, and we bring figures to the understanding of the current situation. So Kate, a member of GWL, will go through the latest release of Women in Multilateralism. Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. I hope this is...
It's fine.
It might sound like it's... regrets, not how to lose. They might just...
Is it? I'm going to give you mine,
that would be gorgeous.
because now you need it more than me.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for showing such exemplary taste. It's not an easy topic at any time, but at 7:30 in the morning, it really requires commitment, and we thank you for it. We're absolutely delighted to share with you the findings of the 2026 Women in Multilateralism report. You know, it's the 4th in an annual series issued by GWL Voices, examining in detail the situation for women within the corridors, the meeting rooms, and high offices of the multilateral system. The purpose of the report, this report this year, is to make more visible, easier to see that which is all too familiar. Fault lines in the system, hidden in plain sight, patterns obscured and yet influential. Just so long-standing are they that they've been taken almost as a given, as normal. For 80 years, since 1945, when diplomats first began to swell the meeting rooms, the negotiating tables, the leadership assignments of the post-World War II international system, the gender identity of that system The participation in it has been overwhelmingly, steadfastly, unrelentingly, but not irredeemably male. The report sets it out in some detail, the state of women's participation in multilateralism over that time and from various angles, on the floor of the General Assembly, in the United Nations Security Council, in the specialised agencies, funds and programs and their governing bodies. Just as a taster, let's start with the member states' permanent representatives to New York. It's the highest ranking of diplomatic postings to the UN system. Since 1947, there's been 2,800 permanent reps to New York, but only 219 of them, from 2,800 to 219, have been women. That's less than 8%. A third of the now 193 member states has never, ever sent a woman to New York, 1/3. Another third, and that takes us over 50%, has sent one woman only in that period. Now, as a consequence, what does that mean? It means that for a quarter of the existence of the United Nations, for 20 UN General Assembly, there was not a single woman on the floor of that assembly. Not a skerrick, not a hint, not a whiff of a woman within shouting distance of the podium of the General Assembly. Even today, only 23% of all permanent representatives to the UN are women. Now, if we were to turn to, and we should, the specialised agencies, funds, programs, departments, offices, as well as regional development banks, the operational side of the system, there is a slightly different story. We track 62 of those entities, and we know from our research that there have been 606 leaders of those various entities since the inception of the post-war system. 606 leaders, but only 14% have been women. A third of the operating system of the UN has never, ever have I appointed a woman to head it up. A third. Another third, isn't it remarkable? It's the same statistics as for the General Assembly. Another third has appointed a woman only once. And although the good news is that today 46% of agencies are headed by women, in the last 12 months there were 8 appointments made, 7 selected men. The data on the senior management teams is more encouraging. 46% of senior managers across the UN are women. But that only underscores how absolutely unacceptable is the pattern of women's exclusion elsewhere. And it underscores that with commitment and intentionality, systematic exclusion can be overcome. However, a cautionary note, a majority of member states are choosing not to overcome that exclusion. Because if you look at the governing bodies of those entities, only 29% of the 32 governing bodies for those entities, only 29% of members are women, and a third of the governing bodies have less than 25% women members. Friends, this year the UN will make a most consequential decision when it elects the next Secretary General. But our report shows a consistent gaping gender gap over the last 80 years. 40 official candidates for the post of Secretary General, only 8 of them women, and 7 of them were in 2016. It's a zero success story, of course, when it comes to appointments. In reality, much of the responsibility falls to the UN Security Council, but there too is a history of exclusion and of non-participation of women. For its first 3 decades, for 30 years, there was not a single woman on the UN Security Council. And over time, there has been an average only of 8% of its members are women. If you look at the P5 today, the only way a woman got to be a member of the permanent 5 of the UN Security Council was thanks to Peter Mandelson, when the UK had to replace its permanent rep. The point is, who's in the room when debates are held and when decisions are taken matters. And when women are locked outside, it means we're robbed of talent, of experience, and of authority. When women are systematically marginalised, we are denied skill and competency. And as a consequence, the relevance, the responsiveness of the system, as arguably we have seen on far too many occasions, is made all that much weaker. We need women's experiences, we need women's voices, we need you to be heard and to influence the direction of the multilateral system. Thank you very much, Cristina.
Let me give this back. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kate. All these figures, you'll find them well explained in GWL's Voices website. You have, I think, circulating stickers where you can find the documentation. You know, those are easy maths, but extremely difficult circumstances to overcome. We all know that, as you said, this leadership remains narrow and homogeneous, and the institutions struggle to build trust, deliver inclusive outcomes, and sustain long-term impact when this narrowness is the one that is found more commonly. I'm going to give the floor now to Maria Leoni, and we would like to hear her perspective, your perspective, Maria, on how to move from commitments to reality, to changes, because the commitment to equality is made regularly. The plans for equality are made constantly. We had this strong Beijing conference in '95, we marked the 30th anniversary, and we have regularly national commitments. And what is, in your experience and with your perspective, the possibility to move for once in all from the engagements to the transformation? Thank you very much, Maria.
This is working? Yeah. Thank you very much, Cristina, and good morning to everyone here. It's very much an honor and a pleasure to join this conversation. I think there are definitely many factors that are important when we think about what makes international leadership more legitimate and effective and inclusive. But absolutely one key factor has to do, and one transformational factor has to do with ensuring women's equal and inclusive participation in decision making. And I just wanted to ground it a little bit in what we are doing here in this conference as well, because we are talking about the spaces that really shape global politics and all of the agendas that we care about, and really all of the issues that we will be discussing this week, any of it, from women's rights to sexual and reproductive rights to indigenous people's rights and climate change, all of them will be affected and influenced by who gets to be appointed by Secretary General this year, but also who gets to represent our countries in the multilateral system and the agendas that they represent, and also who makes the decisions in the international bodies that hold governments accountable when human rights violations occur and when international law is violated, which is what our work mostly focuses on. And that's why representation is very important when we think about international leadership. And then I'd like perhaps to build a little bit on the data that Kate shared, because I think the data that we have, the GWL campaign very much complements that picture, but it also shows this other face of the United Nations that is extremely important, especially for human rights and feminist movement here, which is the accountability architecture for human rights and the representation of women in those spaces. So our campaign focuses focuses on, we track around 102 bodies and mechanisms at the UN level, but also at all the regional multilateral levels. And these are bodies that have a role in really promoting international justice and international law and holding states accountable. Today, women represent around 42% of the positions in those roles, and that does not look terribly bad. And it's actually progress since we started the campaign, where women represented around 33%. But the truth is that we start looking closer to that 42%, and we see that we are not entirely where we should be. That number, for example, drops to around 39% when we exclude the mandates that have to do with women's rights or with children's rights, because we know that that tends to happen, that women tend to be siloed in some of those agendas. And then the number drops to closer to 37% if we look at the positions that really do require state nomination, meaning that you need your government to be backing you so that you can aspire to those roles. And that shows that states are actually nominating more men than women in those spaces, and that foreign policies act as gatekeepers in a way. And it drops to 30% when we look at the international tribunals, which also happen to be some of the the most prestigious and the well-paid and the more political of these appointment processes. And then if we look regionally, in our data, we see that women from the global south tend to be underrepresented in these spaces more than women from the global north. And today, in particular, that underrepresentation is very much present in the region of Africa and Asia, for example, in particular. So I think data is very important, and it shows that the underrepresentation is very much structural, but it's also not random. It really shows a pattern where the closest that you get to power and to influence and to state control appointments, the fewer women that we find. And going back to your question, I think the good thing is that this is not a problem that does not have solutions. It's definitely not a problem. This has nothing to do with not having enough qualified women for these roles. There's definitely a diverse pool of talented women. We could just pick and choose from this conference, and we would be able to fill all of the positions in international justice. And it's also not a problem of not having the frameworks, even legally binding frameworks and political commitments about gender equality. We have Article 8 of the UN Charter. We have Article 8 of the CEDAW Convention that specifically talks about women's equal right to inclusive and participation in international decision-making. We have the Beijing Platform. We have the Pact of the Future. So it's definitely not that. So what I think the gap that we need to fill is a political one, because this is about power, and it is about redistributing power, and power does not get redistributed on its own. So I think that when we think about how we go from the commitment that we have and the extremely talented pool of women that we have to making this a reality, we should be focusing more strategically on what we know is able to build and push and sustain political will, because that's what is lacking, and that's what we need. And it does not happen on its own, but we know that we can build political will, and there are different strategies that the women's rights movements knows very well how to use in building political will to redistribute power. Some of the things that for us have been important, and I think that could be useful for the conversation, is one, very much focusing on continue building diverse coalition of actors around this agenda. Women's rights organizations, civil society organizations are essential, but we cannot do it on our own. No one can actually do it on their own. So really thinking about a diverse coalition of actors is important. We need the political leaders, the diplomats, the academics, the international jurists, the civil society, of course, think tanks and more, to be working more collectively with their different hats, but not sustaining an agenda so that it doesn't fall. I think that's important. I think it's also important that we work more on accountability. And there's different ways that we can build more accountability. Transparency is essential. A lot of these procedures happen, as Kate was saying before, in a very opaque manner. We need to bring more transparency to these procedures, more information about what the criteria are, push for gender parity and gender balance to become part of the criteria in this conversation. We also need more data, because data is essential for accountability. We need to push institutions to have their own data. We need to continue using data for advocacy, and I think there's an opportunity to integrate data and use it more strategically, like the data that GWL Voices have, and the data that GWL has, and the data that other organizations I know have on other spaces of international decision-making in climate, in trade, in arbitration, because I think there are patterns there, that there are unexplored opportunities to continue pushing forward. And then for the litigants, perhaps, of the civil society in the group, I do think that we have the legal frameworks, but we sometimes don't necessarily use them when it comes to international appointments to hold states and institutions accountable. We have been doing a lot of work on that with the CEDAW Convention, with the GR40, which is the new general recommendation, specifically talking about international participation. We have been even exploring national litigation, a lot that I can tell you more about it, but I think there's an opportunity there. And of course, supporting the pipelines, women in different stages. We not only need more women, we need more diverse women in these spaces, and that needs to really connect with the difficult challenges that women face at different stages. And I would just perhaps end by saying that this is not only a year where the Secretary General will be elected, it's also a year where half the membership of the UN treaty bodies are going to be elected, half the membership of the UN special procedures are going to be appointed, their election in the International Court of Justice, in the ICC. A lot of justice spaces are going to be going through election cycles, and at a moment where the global rule of law is under threat and states are not holding themselves accountable, we really need these spaces to be working for accountability, and it's important to have women there.
Wow, Maria, thank you very much. You gave us a wonderful palette of ideas where to really insert ourselves for the advancement. I'm going to move to Esther, and it's very logic now to ask an ambassador for Spain in this case to give us the perspective of member states. Member states are fundamental in the international system, and being myself a Spanish, you've already noticed, being myself a Spanish, I feel pride. I feel pride because there are voices of certain member states that rise above the others, in particular in gender equality, and in particular in the respect and abiding by rule of law. And Spain is one of them. And Esther, with your experience in the Spanish diplomatic system, you've held several positions. You also lived the creation of the Spanish feminist foreign policy. So tell us, how is it that the leadership in Spain committed so openly, so forcefully to equality? What are the main contributions you think you are doing, and how to get other countries following the same path? Esther, over to you.
Hello, good morning. Yes, you can hear me, no? Hello, good morning, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this event. Thank you to you, Cristina, and also to GWL Voices for allowing me to have this privilege to be here today, and thank you all for coming at this early hour. For me, as a woman, as a diplomat, and particularly as an ambassador, it is really a privilege to be part of this conversation, that it is a very necessary conversation right now. We have heard it yesterday. We listened to the intervention. We have listened to the civil society. Multilateralism right now is under strain. We are in the middle of a big transformation. And I think what I could listen is that there is a loss of confidence of the ability of the system to be able to deliver sustainable, inclusive, appropriate solutions that are what our people, the people we represent, are really asking for. So we need to deliver. We need to give the right answers for those people we serve, frankly. As you know, in Spain, we believe in multilateralism, so what we want to do is to reinforce multilateralism. And the opportunity is there. There are right now a lot of processes of reform in the multilateral system, including UN 80, that has been launching, and they are also reforming governance. And in this sense, we believe from Spain that the feminist foreign policy is an element that can contribute to this transformation. In Spain, we started with the foreign feminist policy in 2021. It was the year that it was launching the strategy. I think the first mention about feminism in foreign policy as such was made by Minister González Laya, that it is also a member of this organization in the parliament, that crystallized in a document which is very important because you need to have things in written so that everybody knows what you are going to do and what you are committed to. And then we have also launched several other follow-ups documents like the roadmap for the implementation of feminist foreign policy, and also we've got now a new strategy of feminist cooperation, international cooperation aid policy. So what I think is that in Spain, feminist foreign policy is of course not an isolated policy. It's not something that came out from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is inserted and it stems from a domestic policy. So it is a very clear line that has been marked by the government that equality and the women's right is an essential part of the government policy. So the first step was to create the feminist policy, this as a priority policy, and second, to transform it in a policy that it needs to be transversal. So we need to be able to work in every single space so that feminism is not something accessory or something that goes just in some kind of niche where there is a problem, but that really permeates the whole of the action of a government. So it was logical that if you have that priority, then you translate that priority into the foreign action. And that's why we've got this feminist foreign policy. And going a bit more to what the question was about, what can the states do? And I'm going to rely here a bit in my experience as ambassador of Spain to UN Vienna. The first thing is to achieve parity in the leadership. To have more women nominated as ambassadors. For that you need to work in the parity of your external service. Mm-hmm. That is complete. That is essential. At the end, the numbers are there. They are very clear. They speak by themselves. We listen to the numbers that were presented by the GWL, I read the report. I found it very clear and very interesting, and it is very evident we've got a gap there. And if you take the figures in the Spanish Foreign Service, it was a bit the same. And in that sense, I would like to also recommend you, if you want to know a bit more, the webpage of the Association of Women Diplomats in Spain, that also recorded the details. When I entered the external service, the diplomatic service, only 61.1 diplomats were women. That was 30-something years ago. Okay, very old. But now figures have really changed, and we are around 33% women. But of course, the distribution still is not the same. It's different according to generations. But the change has been made in the last few years, and it is part because we've got this policy, and we all have to comply. There is a leadership that it is really committed to parity. So the first thing would be to have more women diplomats. I think this is something that we are doing in Spain. Still, we don't have parity in the number of ambassadors, female and male, but it is something that we are working on it, and that we are paying really attention, because at the end, you need to have more women in the room when you are taking decisions, as you were very well said. We cannot commit to have parity in committees, commissions, and so on, chairmanships of commissions committee, if you don't have the numbers. So we need to work on that, really. And also in the parity of the whole system. Then, once you've got parity, you start speaking about the quality, not only the numbers, but also it is important to speak about the quality of the jobs. So if you have women, we are right now in Spain, we finally have a woman posted in Washington as ambassador, another woman posted in Peking. We have more women posted in United Nations big responsibilities, but this is something that we need to keep on working. So to know that there is real equality. It's not only parity, but it is equality that you are allowed to go to same places. The second thing I think we need to do is to nominate candidates for multilateral posting as states. If we don't present the right candidates, it's very difficult to elect one. So for that, you need to work inside your own system and be proactive, trying to find the adequate candidates that can participate in a merit-based selection process. For that, you need to start not only speaking about parity inside your own external service, but also with other departments and also with civil society, but because the number of expertise that you need for leadership posts are very broad. It's not only diplomats. We're speaking about engineers, we are speaking about, as you said, lawyers and legal experts and so on. So you need to have this network of information of the vacancies, of promotion of women and encourage women to present themselves as candidates, of supporting your candidate. So it is, for me, that is also a key issue, so that we can have to raise the number of people, of women working in the multilateral system. The third thing I think it is very important is that we also need to have a committed leadership inside the multilateral system itself, in the sense that in those jobs in which you need to vote, states votes, in order, like a Secretary General, vote to appoint somebody. You need to have the commitment towards equality, gender equality, to be taken into account. I know that these nominations and these elections are very complex one, and you have several things you need to take into account, which is fair enough. I mean, there are broad issues, but this commitment on equality, that at the end it is a commitment on the principles in the Charter, it is also something that it must be taking into account in a very serious way. So, and be able to vote, of course, for women. I think it is something that in our case, we've been vocal. The president of the government was very vocal, saying that the multilateral system needs a renovation, and why not? It is the time to have a Secretary General, a woman. So it is all this part of this transformation, we need to build it. I mean, and you need to build it not only internally, I mean, but also in the multilateral system. And then the third thing is that we don't do things by ourselves. We need to have alliances. In our case, in my personal case, I found it was very, very useful to become a member as a state of the group of friends for gender equality, the different group of friends that exist in the different organizations, because it is a way to have a permanent dialogue on these issues with the Secretariat and to know better what the plans are inside the organization to promote a friendly environment for women and for inclusion, how they are working on parity, where are the figures. It is also a way not only to make advocacy for the issue, but to be a bit more also demanding on several things, like to ask for reports, periodic reports. Then you need to include this issue in your public interventions. Sometimes where we are speaking about, different issues, they tell you that perhaps to include this is not part of the conversation, but in our case, we think it is always part of our conversation. So you need to include in your intervention as a country, and at the same time, you have to work on language on resolutions. That is very important. I was reading the other day the resolution for this period of election, and it was a small paragraph that said that encourage member states to present women candidates. So this is a part of the job. So we cannot miss an opportunity to do those as states. So I don't want to be longer. I just wanted to say that this is a crucial moment, that we are not speaking about equality only as a goal, which it is, but also as a tool of a real transformation. So thank you.
Thank you, Esther. You gave a very broad explanation, but definitely diplomacy is about this, about the steps, many of them, small or not so small, but constant. So time perspective and action is fundamental. I'm going to give the floor now to Jocast. And Jocast, you have the responsibility of bringing us your perspective, which is double or triple, maybe even more, because you are younger than the average of us. So welcome to this, you rejuvenate us with your presence and with your ideas. Second, you are from the Global South, and the Global South, in particularly, we heard yesterday, has an immense interest in equality and inclusion, having felt outside of the many many processes. And also, you have been extremely active with your peers, younger people in your country. So over to you. How do you think the youth perspective, the gender perspective you have already lived through can influence this important moment for a transformative United Nations and global power?
Initially, thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here in this room, not only to represent my peers in Mozambique, but as a youth. But allow me to reintroduce myself. Yes, I am Jocas Samuel from Mozambique, and I am a student of recent graduate from International Relations and Diplomacy. And I did an internship in the Foreign Ministry of Mozambique, and I'm working not only as a Girl Mover alumni, but as a Girl Move team member as policy and innovation specialist. And my cause is to bring a new perspective of Mozambique into the international arena. And just like me, there's over 300 girls, young Mozambican leaders working in different areas to do the same. Not only diplomacy, but health, gender, architecture, and so on. To answer your question, so I'm going to be very honest. I'm not just going to talk about geography, but let's go to what is the core. Because when we want to build solutions, we have to go to the core problem. And me personally, I do not really believe that the classic multilateralism that has been put up to us since the 1945 actually works with the developing countries. And I want to be precise, but this is not any type of cynicism. I don't want to isolate Mozambique or any kind of developing countries, because I really believe in international cooperation. What I'm trying to say is that this specific architecture is the one that is not really working for us. And what it has to be done is it has to be built a new structure of the multilateralism. And there's a big difference between being invited to participate and actually sitting on the table to build it. And right now, we think, and it's very obvious, that being invited to participate is not only, okay, it's representation, but it does not mean power. And as young people, we need power, and power is built. It will not be given to us. We are here to construct it, create it day by day. So, and in the global south, and I know that young people everywhere, because I've been listening to a lot of great initiatives throughout this conference, I can see that we have been doing our job. And we are the first generation where the game was actually delivered to us and was designed before we even arrived. And now we have the responsibility to change it. And we are not here just to say complaints about it. We're here to work. And our generation is the first one being asked to reform the system, and we are actually here, and we are actually very grateful for this opportunity and this challenge to do things differently. So I will bring Irving Jane's, that is a scholar, perspective about group thinking in foreign policy. And what I think that has been happening in the United Nations, is this exactly. What is happening? What is exactly group thinking? It is when a closed group mistakes consensus as truth, and they silence dissent, and gradually comes to believe on what they are creating as consensus. And this is what we have been calling multilateralism throughout these years, since 1945. And if you want to consider the future, first we have to see the structure. We have 5 permanent members holding veto power, which conflicts receive mandates, whose debts get restructured, and who leads the institutions and that claim to speak for the world. We had one Secretary General of the United Nations, called Boutros Ghali, and he was the first African to hold this position. And he was denied the second term because he blocked a single permanent member whose military operation he had dared to criticize. That only is a signal of how structural this problem is. So this consensus that this system has been producing is not consensus. Does not reflect the world, does not reflect our needs, and surely does not reflect what our future needs. And let's go for another gap. Just the 5 permanent members of the Security Council together, they hold a combined media of 44 years old. Meanwhile, the majority of humanity is under 30 years old and live in different age areas and regions that are not in this holding permanent seat on the Security Council. And by 2050, Africa itself will hold a quarter of the people in the world. So I think we can see that there is no how to build a new UN without having these regions well represented. So we are being governed intergenerationally by institutions making binding decisions about a world that will be shaped by people who look like me, from places like mine, and from every corner of the globe that has been systematically excluded from the architecture of their decisions. And this is not a representation gap. These are civilizational miscalculation. So, then let's not bring these symbols, let's bring a structure as the solution to this issue. We have the Southeast Asia built. The Asian did not waited for a permanent seat. They did not waited to be nominated. They created their own power, and now they are negotiating how are they going to use. This itself, it's a big example of how things must be done now looking forward. And I know that this model must be the core of replication if you want to change the world. And I believe that the young people, not only in this room, but in the entire world, are actually doing this. So our task now is not to save the United Nations as it currently exists, but it is to design a new architecture of how things must be done. So, I heard here we were talking a lot about accountability. And I had the concept, and I always knew what it meant, but I want to bring the definition again so we can all be in the same page of book here. Accountability is the obligation to accept responsibility for one's actions, decisions, outcomes, including admitting mistakes and providing explanations. I'm going to bring an example of what I do and my peer girl movers have been doing in Mozambique in the last 10 years, and what we are here to bring for the next 10, not only 10, 20, and I don't know when the world will end, but we will for sure be there creating change. So, as girl movers, we have been working in Mozambique, and I'm going to bring some statistics about what is our core issue on gender. In Mozambique, only 3.8% of the women hold formal employment. And where 1 in 3 has suffered physical or sexual violence, where 70% of the girls say violence happens at school, but only 20% of them knows how to express it, knows how to say what is violence. And we looked at that, and as girl movers, we were like, no, we will not just sit and look while we know how to do these things. So we've been gathering that data. We've been making creating research-based evidence and creating grassroots innovative solutions. And as young people, young female Mozambicans, I am very safe to say that this is holding accountability. And we have been creating structure by ourselves. We have different programs in which we reach over 5 to over 25,000 girls along the years. And we have been changing not only our lives as future leaders, but the girls who are still coming. And we've been creating a sense of identity, civic participation, entrepreneurship, and 3 fields of mentorship: peer, leadership, and professional. We have policy clusters where our young leaders do not only comment on it, they are actually designing it with the government. Major cast with 26 years old and other 10 or more, we've been sitting in the major ministries and actually providing solutions. We have been with the youth ministry, with the labor and the gender ministry, and we've been creating projects. We've been based on researched evidence-based, that we ourselves go and take it day by day. So we've been designing it, we've been policy shaping, we've been being change makers and role models. So the question is whether the global institutions will build the infrastructure to receive what we're producing, and if they are actually ready for what we are bringing. So I've been hearing a lot of panels, and I want to bring concrete solutions. First question, there is a question that is coming with a solution. How does we scale this impact, these solutions that we have been building in Mozambique to a global stage? How do we do it? And my first standing will build a UN Youth Agency. I know there is this, the UN Youth Agency. Yes, but we actually want excessive contributions. We want to be able to produce youth impact assessment before any Security Council or General Assembly vote on climate, debt, or conflict. Before we vote on our future, before they vote for our future and table us the consequences of it. Second, we would like to be formal observers of how the Security Council are being credentialed, or how they are being issued, how are they being talked to. We want to be in the same room, not just as observators. We want to participate, and we also want veto power to say this is what we need and this is what we don't need. And to talk about our solutions, not only to be in the room, what about regional blocks that come from national blocks, that comes from districts, provinces, that has the grassroots evidence of what is really going on in the youth? What if with this information that we have, we create these regional blocks that have seats where the decision making is being done? With that said,
Okay.
I want to say that we're not only practitioners in this room, and I know that you guys have been making a wonderful job. So if I'm here today, it's because you've been doing it along the time, along the years, fighting for us, opening the doors for us. Today we bring this new perspective. So this best version of the UN must be rebuilt by this new voice that we have, this new perspective that we have. And I surely believe that if I had not talked, you would have not known. So this is what it actually has to happen. But not only having a voice, because I also have ideas, and these 300 girl movers have a lot of ideas, and these other young people that is here, they have an ideas and they're ready to act. So what we are not actually asking anymore, we're acting. We are like, if we do not have the space, if you do not give us the space, just like Asian, we will build it. And on this day, we will have to negotiate, and I'm quite sure that it will not be easy. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, so it is not just renewing, it's building all together something different. So we have a very broad spectrum. We have to bring more women, we have to work steady all the way through, as the diplomat you so clearly explained, Esther. We have many practices to change, but now we also have your perspective, which is a whole change. So that was extremely interesting. Let me now welcome to the room. Yes, please stand, my dear Helen Clark. She just joined us. She's the co-founder and vice president of Global Women Leaders, and Helen doesn't need an additional presentation just by name, but yes, she was the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, and she holds extremely important position at the United Nations, such as the chief responsible of world development. So Helen, thank you very much for joining us. So yes, we'll give Helen the final big presentation of today's discussion, which maybe we can go very quickly to each of you. From renew to overhaul, what is your vision now? Renew, just adopt some processes and ensure a new Secretary General, which is a woman, or we take the broader perspective that Jokas was saying, a whole rebuild. Kate.
I came into the room reform. I'm now rebuild. No, I mean, in all seriousness, every system is perfectly designed to deliver the results it's delivering. Every system. And if you look at the system or rather, if you look at the results this system has delivered, then you know the system absolutely needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. The problem or the challenge for us is that history rarely provides one the opportunity and the pause required to both dismantle, build consensus for, and remantle systems in the way that we know they have to be. So in a sense, it's building the boat as we sail. That's really the challenge. And thank goodness that we have people of youth, people from the global majority, and people who, with imagination and skill, who are willing to lead us in that regard. And it's enormously inspiring and challenging to hear you, and I thank you for it. So I was reformist. I'm now tearing down the whole bloody thing. Yep.
That's right.
Maria. Please.
Is this working? Yes. No, but thank you, and that's a good question. I'm also inclined, but I think it's important to. It's perhaps not like either or in a way. Like it's like the objective of rebuilding by understanding, what parts of the system are doing good work and we need to preserve, and what parts need to be reformed, and through new voices and new perspectives. I think it's about rethinking a lot of the strategies and a lot of the spaces too. And also, as Kate was saying, understanding also the very difficult moment in which we are in, and sometimes some discussions open up conversations that might be extremely difficult and challenging to navigate. But I think it's rethinking the system is very important, and rethinking power. And that means absolutely, I think young voices and young generations need to be heard, need to be participating much more effectively, need to have much more space and voices. Also civil society, also the people who are doing the work on the front lines. So really thinking where power lies in the multilateral system, I think it's important too, and listening to more voices. And yeah.
Thank you. Esther, rebuild, reform? Difficult question as a representative from a state. What I think, we think that the feminist foreign policy is really a tool that can allow, if we integrate in our decisions, the decisions that are coming in the next few years, that have this power transformed the system. I think at the end, the system justify themselves by the result. But what is the outcome? What are the services they provide? So what we need to do is to see what are the decisions that we made that make the system efficient, really. So for that, also, we need to listen. Because we need to listen to your opinions, the opinions of the young people. We need to listen to the opinions in general of our citizens and our civil society. This is something that we cannot do without you. We need everyone on board. And we need to be able to do, at the end, the task. It is better results, better representation, a system that is closer to the people. So thank you for your contribution.
Are you satisfied with this mixture of rebuild and renew? Let me turn to you before we hand the floor to Helen Clark. Who is for rebuild? Who is for renew? Good. Or a question to our panelists. Yes? Is there somebody that wants to join? Yes, I'm going to give the floor to you. Yes. Maybe.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts. They were really great. Just a couple of questions on some of the gender aspects and one on the technical aspect of nominating someone. So say if we wanted to nominate someone for the Secretary General position from our state, or push for a woman to be nominated, what kind of credentials would we need to be looking at, so that we can sort of get a sense of who should be there? And the other thing, there's a couple of other things that I just want to, when we're doing our gender analysis of the multilaterals, there's a whole, another field of workers, increasingly as it gets defunded, and that's all the consultants that are working as sort of an underclass in the multilateral system, particularly like the World Bank and those institutions. Also, ensuring we don't miss women with disabilities in our analysis. And the other thing is, one thing that would be very useful, because it's important to look at women in leadership, but also the amount of women or the gender equality at administrative levels, and pay gap analysis picks that kind of stuff up. So I was wondering whether there's any pay gap analysis that's envisaged for the UN system and whether we should incorporate that.
I'm going to give the floor for the qualities to Kate. Yes, and then to, of course, Helen. because we've been discussing this in our Global Women Leaders groups on what type of personality, and in particularly a woman, needs to bring to the job.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, there are no barriers to anyone being nominated for Secretary General. I mean, you need to campaign, and you need to have the support of ideally member states who at the end of the day make a decision. So there isn't, a set of must-haves in the official or technical sense. But it's clear to us, and global women leaders, that you need you need applicants of great courage, wisdom, empathy, and a deep commitment to a humanity that is indeed inclusive in all our rich diversity and centred on the charter, delivery of the charter. The charter, the UN Charter begins with we the peoples, not we the member states, certainly not we the white Christian world as a certain foreign minister expressed it, not we the technocrats, but we the peoples. And it's that commitment to the, in both process terms, as the ambassador said, and the end game, that leadership must be dedicated to. And for me, in this era, it means having and bringing a real strength to stand with unpopular people in unpopular places with unpopular needs at unpopular times. In that sense, I think we need an unpopulist to take hold of the United Nations, which we cannot do unless we flourish up a whole range of choices for member states and confront them with a very different profile of person to lead the UN than has been managed currently.
Well, this is a great introduction for me to give the floor to Helen Clark. Helen, would you want to come over here? Maybe have a seat or maybe a stand. Leave your stuff there. No worries. We'll take care of it. Yes. A big applause to Helen. Thank you. You want to stand here?
Oh, I could stand for a minute. Look, sorry I've missed the discussion because I've been involved in a very important discussion on a report of my foundation on addressing sexual violence in New Zealand, which is at horror levels as it is in many of our countries. So, no, I'll stand up. But just some words sort of coming in on the back of what I've heard. Firstly, for a good look at what it's like to run as a woman for Secretary General, go to the internet and download the film called My Year with Helen. And it sets it out in graphic detail. And it's like a horror movie, really, because you know what the end result is. But when you look at it, you realise why it was so difficult. One of the phrases I'll never forget from during my campaign was a very senior diplomat saying to me, Helen, your strength is your weakness. Strong women terrify a lot of people. And yet, to be a woman candidate for Secretary General, you have to be strong. And particularly those of our generation who've had to battle everything, to get to senior positions. We've developed a lot of resilience, and we probably don't suffer fools gladly, and there's a lot around, aren't there? So, but, truth to power is not something that necessarily member states are looking for. Remember, most member states have never had a woman leader. Some have had a queen, but not many have had presidents or or prime ministers. So it's a bit unusual. And so all the stereotypes about leadership being a men's thing are prevalent in societies where women haven't been able to get right to the top. So cut to the chase. Last time, 10 years ago, there were 13 candidates for Secretary General. 7 were women, 6 were men. A man got it. We were all wiped out. This time, the field is horribly small. It's only 4 hands up. 2 men, 2 women. Very easy to knock over 2 women. There needs to be a bigger field. I really hope more candidates will come in, because in a sense there's a critical mass you need just to be pushing forward on this. It won't be easy. The candidates will be very conscious of the strength as your weakness, but you can't present as something you're not, because that's a lack of authenticity, and people spot that immediately as well. So it will be a question of setting out a vision for what the UN could be, which is not what it is today. Now, just perhaps going to the sort of other issues implicit in the session, the UN desperately needs reform, and UN 80 is not it. It needs charter reform. And there's a school of thought that says, oh, you couldn't possibly embark on it now because the multilateral environment's too toxic, too challenged. But the work needs to be done for when there is an opening. There is quite an active Article 109 campaign for UN reform. I'm not for knocking it all down and starting again. I mean, you'd probably end up with worse. And associated with the UN today is an enormous body of conventions, treaties, norms, etc., which we have to uphold as the basis of international law, honoured in the breach more than the observance as it is at the moment. But I am a supporter of the Article 109 campaign for a properly organised, long process charter review process. And there's a very good proposal that floats around alongside the proposal for a conference, which talks about how you could update the UN. For example, the charter was finalised before the nuclear bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It doesn't foresee the nuclear age. Still an existential threat. It was decades after the charter was written that the UN picked up the issue of the environment, and the environmental threats are another set of existential threats. So there is a view that, the charter could be updated somewhat substantively, recognising these major issues. There's also the perennial issue of the Security Council veto. And yes, there is the Uniting for Peace resolution, which enables the General Assembly to take matters up, but it doesn't have the force of law. It's the UN Security Council decisions which have the force of law. So there's some creative thinking around, could you create a parallel parliamentary assembly drawn from the world's parliaments, not directly elected, that would sit alongside the General Assembly, and if you had a 2/3 majority in both of those, you could override a veto. Now, it's quite a high bar, but it's possible, So anyway, I've been involved in discussions about the veto power for decades, since I was New Zealand Prime Minister. For the record, New Zealand never supported the veto. Never. From 1945. I think Australia the same. But it may well have been, let's face it, the condition for the US coming in, because it didn't come into the League of Nations, which had no veto. I'm very much against extending the veto. I think that makes the situation worse. But I think we can look at a number of ways of constraining the veto through this sort of mechanism that I've just discussed. Also, the French have been quite dogged in pursuing the thought that the veto would be deemed not to apply where there's a genocide occurring. Well, people argue about when and where that is too. There's also, I understand in the Charter, an understanding that you shouldn't, on the Security Council, even be, participating in a vote where you have a stake in the issue. Hasn't stopped Russia on Ukraine or all sorts of other people and other things, right? So there may be some low-hanging fruit around Security Council reform that could be tackled, recognising that turkeys don't vote for an early Christmas, and the 5 who have the veto probably won't give it up. But we could manage it better. So those are just some of my random thoughts before I run to the next meeting. But I do recommend the film if you feel strong enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, never watch it. Thank you very much, Helen. I think this is a great way to conclude. It's been a very good discussion. We have very wide presentations and deep presentations from our panelists. Also, we had the choice as well in front of us, whether to rebuild or renew. And now we have a suggestion, which is to watch a film that was incredibly important in your life. You went through 10 years ago, but there is a second part that is defining right now, this year. And the second part, for example, has another stopover, which on the 9th of June will be a debate among the candidates that in Geneva, GWL is co-organizing with the United Nations Foundation. So we hope to see the candidates talking amongst themselves to the world about the vision and whether they'll renew or rebuild. Thank you very much. It's been a very good way to start the day. Thank you. Wish you all the best for the conference and see you around. Thanks for joining us. And a big applause to our panelists and to Helen, who's already leaving. Thank you.